you know how like people say like you got lucky doing it, and I'm the same way. I think you can, and we can talk about this, but I think there is an element of luck. 100% there's an element of luck, but I think the element of luck, your chances of luck increases the more you put yourself out there, if that makes sense,
Yeah, I
because
don't
you
know
have
if
more cracks at it.
yeah, I don't know if this was actually from an episode you did with Iqbal or like I heard it somewhere. It's probably just a thing that's in the air. Luck is like it's like a combination of things. Obviously, luck has to play a part of it, but like you have to sort of put yourself in position for like luck to almost present itself. I think
Yeah.
like there's always going to be an element of luck or just meeting someone by random chance or like
Hmm.
any of that stuff. But yeah, you have to sort of put in like you have to like be doing the effort. It's like I feel like with improv shows or like seances, which I've never really been to a seance, but that like you sort of have to set the stage for like the spirits to come in if you're talking about a seance. And with improv, you have to like sort of set your mind, like just get your mind right, practice, like free yourself to allow you to like be taken over by something on stage so that magic can happen. Like you have to put yourself in
Yeah.
positions for shit to
So
pop off.
Mr. Rathod's neighborhood. It's Mr. Rathod's neighborhood.
He wants you to meet his
It's
friends.
Mr. Rathod's neighborhood.
Have a ball now,
It's
y'all.
Mr. Rathod's neighborhood.
Just might learn something.
It's Mr. Rathod's neighborhood.
Yes, you.
It's Mr. Rathod's neighborhood.
It's time to
Enjoy the show.
Well, let's just like, I mean, that seems like we already kind of started, so let's just excuse me, start there. So I had a show last night and I'm like, I mean, we were screaming and giggling and laughing, and I ran into this kid who I used to perform with, who I haven't seen in like 6 years, which is really cool. But yeah, I feel like my voice is about to disappear, and we're in the sort of day one of a 3 show, 7 day tear. So it's a pretty wild run. But yeah, so maybe let's just kind of kick things off then. So you're Zan. Thanks for being
yes,
on. Much
thank you.
appreciated, man. We're rocking the old school Bulls green underbill combo. I
Yeah,
found this in my parents' closet. It was a hat or garage. I don't remember where, but this hat has been in our family for quite a while.
I bought this off of eBay, and I usually take all the stickers off, but this one is kind of embedded in it.
Is it
Uh,
really?
yeah, it's like you can see the stitching through it, so I was like, we'll just leave this one on. Yeah,
Oh man,
it's like the old school like Bulls wavy hat. So yeah.
how does this how does it happen? Those stickers eventually gonna like be at the top of your head if you keep that hat long enough. Man, that's
Mm.
crazy. Okay, cool. So you were talking about sort of yeah, just starting in some digital stuff, but maybe go back what kind of podcast you got, what you do, the blog, all that stuff, and then we'll kind of like circle back forward.
Yeah, so I have cultivated a magical experience for all my listeners and readers. It's called Digital Thoughts. No, I'm just kidding.
That's
Yeah, no,
great.
no, but yeah, the News Learning podcast is called Digital Thoughts. You can find it on Substacks or just type in Digital Thoughts and Syed. Yeah, and the newsletter is me talking about digital healthcare from a clinical perspective. I'm just trying to bridge the gap between the clinical side and the technology side, and then the podcast is just having cool people in digital healthcare, and just honestly picking their brain. As I don't like that term, but just talking to them and interviewing them about what they're doing and all the all the cool stuff that they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. I feel like there's been this like people don't like the term picking your brain anymore, and I don't know why. I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess I see it, but
I think it's
why not?
because, yeah, I think. Have you seen that meme of where it says like picking your brain, and they have what's Hannibal Lecter? Um, and
No,
he's
I
like
haven't.
kind of.
That's
I think
funny.
that's what I think of when people say picking your brain. Also,
What's a better
I think picking your brain, it's just so nebulous and people don't really know what it means. One thing that and this is not to like take this off the rails, but one of the reasons why I started all this was because I was trying to make a career transition. So I was like networking like a madman. And I found that, and even when people reach out to me, I find that if somebody comes at you and says like, "Hey, how's it going? I'd love to pick your brain." That's like a very like open-ended thing, and you don't know if you can help them, right? So if you just say like, "Hey, I'm looking to make a career transition," or "Hey, how did you do the X, Y, and Z?" Those are questions that you might have answers to, and you can answer it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's just you're setting an expectation with the other person.
Mhm.
Like, especially if you're reaching out to someone who you don't know. Like, if you were to say that to me, just as a side note, Zan and I have known each other since pharmacy school, like 14 years ago or whatever. But like, if you were to say that to me, like, I sort of know you long enough to be like, all right, whatever, we can talk about anything. But if you're hitting up someone who's a stranger, yeah, why would they say yes? Like if you just said something non-specific versus like,
Yeah,
I want to talk to you about this specific thing.
because picking your brain could be like, okay, the meaning of life to all the way to what's your favorite thing to eat at breakfast, right? Like, I mean, it can be so on this, like all over the place. So I
Yeah.
think like one thing that I learned is just be like direct with what you're trying to ask. And even with me now, I'm no celebrity by any stretch of the imagination, but people reach out to me just because of like the random things I'm doing, or I made a career transition, and it'll just be like, "Hey, Zan," I'm like, "Hey," and it's like it's just, like it's just like, or I'm waiting for them to like add on to that, because like it's just kind of like, "Hey Zan," like maybe they forgot to, like, some people type in multiple messages,
Yeah.
and so it's just like, just get to the point, just like, "Hey, I'm reaching out to you because of this. I'm looking for doing this. Can you help me? Can we sit down and talk?" And you are more likely to get a. I think even me initially when I started, I was like, "Oh man, I don't want to make things transactional, whatever," but um everyone does it. Everyone needs it. We all need help, mentorship, whatever you want to call it. And there's a lot of people that are willing to help you, but they just need to know how they can help you. And then they're more likely to help you if it's something they can do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good, just like be direct. And you can do it without being like, I don't, yeah, and you can do it in a way probably that isn't like, I need you to help me get a job within your department. That seems a little
Yeah.
too heavy-handed versus like, yeah, I don't know, something
Yeah.
less
Because,
intense.
yeah. And then reach out to people that you're genuinely interested in, and you want to build a connection, right? Like, I'm not for transactional relationships. I think that's one thing that, and it's kind of ironic as I'm saying be direct, and because you're asking them a question, but I think that you can still have a good relationship with somebody with a transaction, but the relationship is not just about that transaction. There's a lot of people I'm still really good friends with, that have helped me through the process, and it was only because I reached out to them because they were interesting, and I was like, "Hey, this dude seems cool," or lady, whatever, and I just kept in touch with them because they were just awesome people that I wanted to get to know. And I just sometimes will random, "Hey, how's everything going?" Like, I'm not literally asking for anything, whatever. And I
Yeah.
think people get really caught back by that because um we live kind of culturally, not culturally, but like kind of, I feel like we live in a society that's all about transactions. Like, what can I get out of you? And I
Yeah.
feel like that sucks. That's like a really crappy way to live, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, you kind of like as I mean, I know you were fairly young when you came here, but you still have like, deep roots to like not this country. Same with me, I guess, even being like a first generation, like, one of my friends would describe like 'cause he's also like a first generation kid, and he would say like you when he would walk into his family home, it'd be like you were walking into a different world, like the smells, the sounds, and like the same with like my parents' house, like even though he still all spoke English and shit, but it like smelled different, sounded different, and so there's still like a connection to like another culture or another just sort of like way to live, or even just from your like network of people. So you sort of know that like there's parts of things that drive us that don't, I don't know, they seem against. They just don't seem
Yeah.
like the best way to do stuff.
Yeah, I was actually having a discussion recently. I'd love to actually hear your thoughts about this. Is we were talking about how AI is coming in, and
I'm only
no, like
laughing
in
because
terms
it's
of
funny
like
that you're asking an AI question.
no, no,
I
no.
don't
It's
know.
not an AI question specifically, but it's like, they were like, "Hey, AI is drifting us apart. It's loosening the connections between like healthcare providers and their patients, and how do we stop that?" And I was like, "You can't stop it, because every technology that comes into place is meant to speed up the process, and speed doesn't allow for like a, um, a really in-depth interaction, right?" But then I was like, I mean, and this is what my thought, and I was like, actually, just like I was kind of figuring it out as I was talking, and I came to the conclusion, is like we need a cultural shift, right? Like, your interaction should be more than just seeing the doctor. Like you need to make an effort to make a connection, right? I think those are two different things: doing your job and making a connection, in life and in your work, right? And I think that our society now has gone so far to the transactional side, where okay, if you can't help me, why should I be talking to you? That I don't even think AI is the problem. I think it's just like our society has kind of eroded the whole process of making a friend, right? It takes time. Like you and I
Yeah.
have known each other for what, 15 years or something crazy like that,
Yeah.
right? We had some ups and downs, whatever, but like it took us a long time to get to this point, right? Like every time we meet, it's like we kind of just started from the like we just met yesterday, but that takes a long time to do, and I think we just don't do it anymore, and I just don't understand why.
You know something legitimately, if I don't even know if I've thought of this until you said it right now, but like this fear of AI and in the context of like a lack of human connection, like that, what you just said, like it sort of already exists in the way that we communicate. If there isn't a benefit, why would I talk to you? If you're seeing your patients, it's not just about like telling them stuff, it's about like building a connection. And if we're already there, like then like what's well, like you're already there. So the thing that we're afraid of already exists, and we are the like AI that we fear almost, which is like why, I think the improv stuff is so like from a communication perspective, like that's a core part of that work is like how do you build a connection with the person that you're talking to? Like that's because we aren't robots, man. We're people, and be funny if someone was like, oh, that's the first time I've helped someone realize that they're a person. But like yeah, that's very interesting. I guess I've never thought about it like that, that we've kind of become the robots that we fear because of the way that we choose to interact. And that's obviously a very general statement. People, there's a variety of people trying and making efforts, but sort of maybe as a culture, that's sort of our approach.
Yeah, I think that, and I think yeah, like we're already there, and that's my argument. Like we're already, what are you afraid of? We're already in that
Yeah.
society. We're already
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
stuff. And I mean, if you're really truly afraid of it, then go and talk to people, right? Go outside and not even outside, just like reach out to people that you don't even need anything from. You just think that they're doing some cool stuff. Like, hey, love what you're doing. Could we talk? Right? And like, just like kind of going back to the initial point, like, you know, I think people are so caught aback by hearing something good about them, right? Because most of it is like, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? Like throughout your life, right? You're like, hey, I'm I just love what you're putting out, or I love your thoughts, or I love your career, like whatever. Can we just talk about it and more? I think that's another reason why I think people are so there. Like I said, there's a lot of people willing to talk to you, and I think that a lot of it is because it's just an uncommon interaction nowadays where people are just genuinely trying to get to know each other.
Yeah. That's like the joy of like I love that. I love getting I mean that's why I started the podcast for a variety one of the main reasons I was like it's pretty interesting to just sit and like chat and learn and like what can I gain from that, and not even in a transactional way, what can I learn about the way that you live your life that can be of value to me? Like I want to like pull pieces together, things that people are doing successfully, effectively, or struggling with, and like learn through that. And yeah, it's really, yeah, it's kind of a bummer that and I think that's I keep going back to the improv stuff. Like I feel like schools can foster that. Like if we I don't know how much the value of communication is fostered sort of at large. And yeah, I think we
It's
more
not.
of it.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think it is. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you're writing stuff, whatever, but I don't think. uh, Maybe it goes back to time. Um, I think people just feel like it takes too much time to get to know people. Um,
I mean, it does. It's
and
like freaking exhausting, bro. There's like so much of an emotional, like it's so tiring to like invest your like spirit in other people. I mean, it's like wonderful, but it is tiring, man. And like how many, and as you get, I've been thinking about as I've been getting older, whatever, we're in our like mid 30s, but like, I think that that's the time, where like people start to get in, like, we've been in our careers for like 11 years, and I know we've been, you've shifted around and I've stayed at the same place, but just as a professional, like 11 years is like a pretty long time, to start to like, I'm starting to feel like I definitely have a better sense of my strengths and weaknesses and skills. Like at least I feel a lot more in control of it than I did a couple years ago. And so like there's that. So you've been in a career for a long time. People are starting to build families and have all these like, and you're just busy doing other stuff. And like, so that it's yeah, I'm more and more, I'm just like, I don't even feel like talking to like I like new people and it's awesome, but it's like I want to spend a lot more of my time with just the people that I've known for like a long time, just like deep, close friends and all that. But yeah, it's tiring, man. Like building, maintaining, sustaining relationships is an exhausting thing, but it's like it seems very well worth it. Like all the stuff, all the relationships that I've cultivated that have a lot of professional and non-professional, like those feel very fulfilling in a variety of different ways. So it's definitely like worth it. It's just exhausting.
This is where I think like technology can bring us together. This is like kind of counterpoint to my point is, we have quick ways of reaching out to people, right? Like a random text saying, "Hey, how's it going?"
Yeah.
You can't tell me everyone who's gotten a random text from somebody that I haven't talked to for in a couple of months, maybe a couple of years, it brings a smile to your face if you genuinely like that person, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever. Like just something like a simple act like that can, and then you start a text conversation and then maybe turns into a phone call and then maybe like, you end up going to see each other, right? Like, but that doesn't start without making a step. And I think everyone, and I would 100% me included in this, like, well, that person never reached out to me. Why should I reach out to them, right? Like that doesn't work. That mentality doesn't work. And I was stuck in that for so long. And I was
Yeah.
like, F it. It doesn't make me a smaller person to be like, hey, how's it going? Like, how's life? Whatever. If
Yeah.
anything, like I'm trying to just keep cultivating that relationship. And just by like that little act of a follow-up, even if somebody hasn't responded to you, just text them again in a couple of months, whatever, right? They'll just keep ignoring it. What's the problem? Like you literally don't see them, right?
Yeah.
And eventually most of them will be like, hey, sorry, because people have lives, they forget things, whatever. There's a lot of times I'm meant to text people back and I completely forget, and then I like see it like a couple months later when I'm like deleting extra things and I'm like, crap. um
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's just like, but I think that's how technology can help us get together. Is just it allows us to quickly reach out to people where we wouldn't have been able to before.
Do you find so I've been at a university institution working on the side where like I don't know if I've interacted with like technology. um like I guess the thing that I think I find so interesting about what you're writing about and like potting about is like we don't really talk about AI much at work. We've talked a little bit about Chat GPT, but it doesn't really play like a role or like just even sort of like technology, like fast moving technology. So it's a little outside of my wheelhouse. Like, have you seen in your, because you've worked at like hospitals and now, and maybe you can tell whatever you like feel like sharing about where you work now, but like, do you find people are afraid? I guess to sort of add a caveat, I assume any new technology people get afraid about it's like how it's going to change stuff. But what have you been like sort of seeing in your professional spaces and people's way of interacting with some of the new technology?
Yeah, I mean, so for people that don't know, I after I graduated school, went to straight into oncology. Worked at an academic institution for like 8 years. Then I went to a smaller hospital, and then now I work as a product manager for AmerisourceBergen, the head of their clinical analytics products, which is it's really interesting. But yeah, the healthcare world and the tech world are completely different. Like in healthcare, when you see tech, you're like, God damn, like this is another hurdle that we have to go across, right? Because in general, like technology when it's implemented in healthcare is just terrible. It's just not really well built. It's not intuitive. It's just a money grab. Most of the times it's just a money grab because, it's like 4.3 trillion. I think it's like 4.3 trillion dollars are spent in healthcare every year. So all these companies are coming in and trying to get a piece of that pie, right? And there's so much proprietary stuff. No one talks to each other. And it's like it keeps every new technology that comes out, it just adds another silo, another hurdle, right? And there's reasons for that. We can go into it a little later, but like in terms of AI and stuff, I think people in healthcare that are not like necessarily tech savvy, I think they're a little scared right now because they don't truly understand it. And I always tell people like, hey, you don't have to know, you don't have to dive deep into the technology. Just literally open up ChatGPT, and there, I mean, there's hundreds of, not, I mean, actually, at this point, there's hundreds of large language models, but ChatGPT is the most common one. Just open it up and start asking questions and seeing where the guardrails are, what is it good at, what is it not good at. And then just from that, you can kind of, not only will you at least understand what it's capable of, but you can also have a pointed discussion with somebody when like something like this is coming in, right? Like if somebody comes up to you like, hey, we have this new AI technology that's going to do this, this, and this. But you can be like, yo, I don't, not saying that they're lying to you, but you can also be like, that seems a little far fetched from what I've seen. But hey, when you're looking at it, you can make a better assessment of what they're selling you. Other if you didn't, because then a lot of times either what happens is either you're like, nope, this is not possible, or oh my god, this is going to solve all my problems. And that's where like I think the distrust and the anger comes in from, is when you adopt these technologies that are not meant to be used in a certain way, you leave with a sour taste in your mouth. You're like, ah, F it, I'm never going to look at it ever again. And then from the technology side, I think that people are just always really, I mean, like me included, like I always like the bleeding edge of stuff and seeing what's out there. And because it's just interesting to me, I just like, um, I don't mind breaking things. I have like a computer graveyard underneath my feet right now, um, because I'm like working on some stuff on the side. But I know not everyone's like me, right? I know that, but there's more people like me in the tech side because they're like, hey, this is cool. How can we use it? So like in healthcare, you're like, oh man, uh, this is going to take X from us. In tech is like, hey, we're going to streamline this for them, right? Like we're going to use this. It's like there's like two different ways of looking at it. And
Yeah.
obviously these are generalizations. I'm not saying that everyone's like that or whatever, but they're like two sides of the same. They're like opposite ends of it. And that's where I'm trying to fit in. Is I'm trying to fit in the middle, because I think for too long the tech side has not had any clinical input. No, no one that is me or has my training, not shouldn't say no one, but there weren't too many people like me that were going into it, mainly because we didn't know or think that we could do it. But now I think with COVID and everything that happened, A, there was burnout, and B, we saw that, hey, if we don't get involved now, uh it's gonna get terrible for us. And I mean our burnout rate might get worse. So that's kind of why I made the switch. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question. I'm kind of like running around in circles right now, but like the healthcare side and the tech side are like complete opposites of each other.
Yeah, that's and what do you just because the goals of both industries are different, or they're just like they didn't know that they should be like, it's really what it seems like is that there are, and this is probably with everything, there's like better ways for those two parties to communicate and collaborate. And right now they're just like speaking different languages, and their ultimate goal can be the same. How do we more effectively help our patients or whatever, like, and it's just they're coming from different angles. And it's like, yeah, you need someone who can, like, you essentially are trying to be the translator between the two groups, given that you sort of are like, a pharmacist on one side and then someone who's like super interested in technology, I guess, to like, oversimplify it. But you sort of can speak the language of both groups probably pretty well.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the goal. Obviously, I can do the clinical side way better than the tech side, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
trying to be a conduit for that, because I mean, like, a really simple example is, how do you, what is, who is the customer for each thing, right? And then the fact that you are even saying customer in healthcare is seen as a sleazy thing,
It
right?
does seem weird. I mean, because we
Yeah,
don't talk about, like, when we're working with prescribers, like doing like some of the academic detailing work, like we don't consider them customers. It's just not in our lingo whatsoever in the, yeah, in the
but
healthcare
but
space.
they technically are customers, right? Like they're
Yeah.
technically customers of your product that you're putting out there. So like a tech side will call it customers, the healthcare side will call it patients, and both of them think that they're talking about two different things. Does that make sense? Or like the end user is different, right? So the end user for them, like the end user for healthcare is like healthcare providers, patients, and payers, which are like PBMs or
Insurance.
whatever,
Yeah.
insurance companies. For tech people, the end user is generally the person using their product, right? And so like, but like all of them are all saying the same thing, but they're just using different languages. And I think that slowly and slowly it's starting to kind of mesh into one thing. And I have kind of a controversial take. I don't even think that's that controversial, but I think if we looked at, if healthcare adopted the customer mindset, like, hey, these are our customers, I think that comes with a better connotation than patient. Like patient comes with like, okay, yeah, we need to take care of them, whatever. But a customer, you want to take care of them, right? In a different way. Like you need to make sure that their experience is good. You need to make sure that they're happy all the time, whatever, right? Like a patient has not necessarily been that way. Like, yeah, you want to take care of them in the sense of
Mm.
making them feel better, but do we really care about their experience throughout the healthcare system? I hope not, because right now the experience is terrible. So if this is us caring, then I don't want to know what not caring looks like. You know what I mean? You know,
That's
a
funny.
customer you're trying to make, you're trying to be competitive with pricing. You're trying to be competitive with the experience. You're trying to be competitive with all these things. Like consumerization is what customers linked with consumerization. And I think the consumerization of healthcare, yes, it needs to have some guardrails, but we need consumerization in healthcare because that really puts the end user as the top of the pyramid and then moves back down, right? So like the end user is the patient, the provider, I mean payers too, technically, but but like that can really only help us because people are now looking at us like, hey, how do we make our customers, our end users, feel better about using our stuff? Right now, it's just like, whatever. We're this point solution, and usually they're only focused on the patient. They're not worried about the providers or anything like that. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I've just thought about for a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I mean, I think honestly, like, yeah, within the healthcare space, just the concept of thinking someone as a customer, you're right. There is like a potential feeling of sleaziness. There's the idea, the feeling of like, I don't know, do companies even care about the customer? But ultimately, like, the company wouldn't exist if they didn't try to focus on the customer. And you don't have to be like, yeah, there's probably like still a patient customer centric business approach that you can do without becoming a sleazy, like, I don't know,
And I think
monster.
also we need to get off our high horse, honestly, in healthcare. No, I'm being serious. Like,
Yeah.
they are customers. They're paying us. Are we doing it for free? If we're doing it for free, then okay, great. Let's not call them customers. 100% not doing it for free. I can tell you that for a fact. Like, these people are being billed astronomical rates. Some of it because of our direction, right? Um, and it's just like they are like, I mean, they're part of paying our salary. They're our stakeholders, right? So I find it weird. Like, yeah, I mean, I do understand the other argument of it. Like, hey, if you take the patient part of it out, all right, then we're basically making it a business. But let's not kid ourselves. Healthcare is a business,
Yeah.
and it's just gallivanting around in a way where it's like, oh, we're not a business. Oh, okay, yeah, but
You're right. It's
dude,
almost more nefarious, actually.
yeah,
Like, you're
just
lying about what you truly are. If you just like admit it, then there's more, I
yeah,
don't know, you can operate with more truth and honesty. It's so interesting.
yeah. And then like I had a conversation with somebody recently. This is kind of related, but he was like, because people say healthcare is broken, and he was like, no, healthcare is not broken. It works exactly the way it was set up to work. He's like, the reason why we think it's broken is because it doesn't meet our expectations of what it should be, like our moral expectations of what it should be, right? When we think of healthcare, we think about helping people, helping them get better, helping them get a better life, not putting them in generational debt that they can never get out of, or all these other things that healthcare, like making it hard to navigate the system. Like that's not what we expect it to be. He's like, healthcare is made this way. It was built this way. It is supposed to be this way, and it's working exactly the way it's supposed to work. It's keeping out the people it doesn't want to keep, and it's bringing in the people that it wants. And it's like, just morally, it doesn't work with us morally,
Yeah.
but that's why we think it's broken.
Yeah, that's I've heard that same thing with so many large systems like government systems, other sort of public institute or whatever. It's like, no, it's working the way that it was set up to work, banking and all that shit. Like, it's not broken. It is doing exactly what you want it to do. Interesting. What is this person that you respect? Did you just interview them? I feel like I have
Yeah,
that
Rusham
somewhere.
Rusham Modi is the guy. He's a doctor. He's a gastroenterologist in California. Really cool dude. He has his
Yeah.
own podcast actually. So definitely check him out.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn. Yeah, that's really what was his so like how does he, and maybe how do you or whatever, like, knowing that the system is working the way that it was set up to do, like, what does he do to try and sort of circumvent that, or what are you trying to do to, I mean, I guess sort of what you're doing is an attempt to try and circumvent a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my attempt at it is, the reason why I went into tech is because I want to be able to help at scale. Eventually get to that point where I'm able to, solve the problem, not just deal with the problem. I think in healthcare, when you're in healthcare, you're just dealing with the problem. I mean, even you said like circumvent this. Like we shouldn't have a system where we have to circumvent it to help people. Right now, that's the system that exists, right? And that's what I'm trying to. I mean, maybe I get to that point, maybe I don't, but that's my goal, is to get to a point where I can at least help build a system where we're not circumventing it anymore, and it aligns more so with our moral compass, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, there's some wild research that I've done with like just my newsletter and stuff. Is like I think people take for granted what they have and like the luxuries that we have growing up. Like for example, um, I was looking at poverty and how that affects your health. And the Times published an article, I think like a couple of years ago, saying in Chicago, kind of where you live, where I used to live in like Chicagoland area, one zip code can be the difference between 30 years of your life. Imagine that, right? You guys could be doing the same things, but just one zip code away, your life expectancy is now 30 years greater than the person, the zip code next to you. I was talking to another person who lives in DC, and they said they have a statistic where the train stops. I forgot what they call their train system, but where that stops, they can literally tell you what your life expectancy is based on what train stop you're like taking, what area you live in, basically. And then that kind of goes into, well, then people talk about, okay, well, to get out of poverty, you got to do this, you got to get an education, you got to work really hard, whatever. So then Georgetown did a study recently, and I can send you the link to this article. Georgetown recently did a study looking at education and poverty. So they followed a bunch of students, and they found that the smart a smart kid in a low income household is less likely to get to college than a dumb kid. I shouldn't say dumb, but
Sure. Not as
well, I just said it already. Well, a dumb kid from a high income, high income. Could you imagine that you are smart, you're working hard, but somebody who is not as smart as you is more likely to make it to college and start their career earlier and start making more money than you, even though you're much smarter than them. But it's just you can't get out of it. And that's like kind of like what happens like with generational poverty, is like it's just like a cycle that keeps going. Because but like people are like, oh no, you just pick yourselves up from the bootstraps and this like that. Well, tell that to the single mother with 3 jobs. She's trying, she's
Yeah.
working way harder than I am. Why isn't she able to get out of it? Is she not working hard enough? I think she's working really hard, right? I mean, it's just like, I think also like our society needs to understand that things are not as easy as we think it is, just because from our standpoint it was easy, right?
Yeah.
Like I grew up in a very middle class thing. Like we moved here, we're immigrants, and my family provided everything I could. Like I didn't have to work while I was in. I mean, South Asians, they don't allow their kids to work. It's like study, study, study. My first job was literally like before college, like the summer before college, right? My parents literally did not allow me to get a job. Like that's how privileged I was, right?
Yeah, mine
And
too.
my
My
dad is
first
working
job.
2 jobs, and my mom
Yeah.
started working here. But I grew up in an environment where I was allowed to, you know, continue studying and whatever, and hopefully not F up. And that's why I'm here. Like, but if I lived in a different socioeconomic class, would I be here? I don't know. I would like to think so, but the odds say no.
Yeah, that's really freaking crazy. So they attribute, so where you live impacts your like upward financial mobility, I guess, and it impacts your health exclusively based on your where you live and the sort of
Yeah.
financial status. Are they the financial like what's the and is it because the systems are driven by money? Like what's the sort of
So
at the
so they
underneath? What's the concept?
hypothesized. So they hypothesized. So in terms of like education side, so Georgetown they hypothesized that it was due to a lot of different factors, right? A lot of these kids in lower income households have to start working younger, right? So they have to start bringing in money to the house. So that interrupts their education. So, they're starting and stopping quite a bit, or they find a job and they kind of just are in it, and they don't or can't go back to educate themselves, right? So that's one of the reasons why. In terms of healthcare, I think this goes back to social determinants of health, right? There's so many different factors. So healthcare is more than just health. Your health is more than just healthcare, and I think people forget that. Like, oh, okay, you have an access to you have a hospital really close to you. Okay, that's great, but the closest grocery store is like 20 minutes away, half an hour away, right? Um, you know, the closest things to you are now fast food things, right? So you are working two jobs, or you have low, you're a factory worker with low income. You have three kids. You want to feed them. You don't have time to go to the grocery store, so you're going to stop at the McDonald's close by. So then again, obesity is higher in those areas, right? And this is not even taking race into account, right? This is just talking about just income. And that's why I like these studies, because they don't really talk about race. And I think, uh, and not because there's a racial aspect to it, but I think when people see these kind of numbers and they're like, hey, this is crazy, and it's not talking about race, especially in the climate we live in, I think people get turned off by it. Not saying it's good, right, or wrong, but it's just like it can affect really anyone and everything,
Yeah.
and it's a great way of looking at it. But yeah, it's crazy because you have food deserts, you have activity level, like, dude, you and I, when we were going out to the park, were we worried about getting shot? Were we worried about any of this? No, we weren't, right? So just the act of physically being able to hang out outside is also something that we take for granted, right? Because we're able to just I can literally just walk outside, go for a stroll, even in the middle of the night, go out for a run, whatever, and not have to worry about anything. These kids can't, right? They're worried about getting shot. Their parents are like, hey, come in at this certain time or whatever. It's a complete different lifestyle. So like little things like that, like all compound over time.
Yeah. Is because we've done some work with one of our like educational materials at work is on diabetes, or type 2 diabetes in particular, and uh and we talked about a little, we like very briefly touch on social determinants of health, but that's kind of like the first time I've really sort of encountered that. I know with every condition it's like not just having the condition, as you said, there's like so many other factors. There was like a, man, I'm gonna like butcher this study, but it was like they were looking at people who, like, I don't know, they were living in poverty somewhere, but they had asthma or like allergies, and essentially it was like the home environment was the thing that was worsening their asthma. It wasn't like the correct medication or any of this other shit. And it's like there's so many, yeah, it's just it's quite a complex web. So within like, do you know much about like our sort of as a healthcare industry or whatever, has the understanding of the social determinants of health or the many factors that impact, do you think that that's been an integral part of the way that we care for patients?
No, I
Mm.
think it's starting to. I think
Yeah.
people are starting to realize that. But no, I think that's part of the problem. And I think a lot of that has to do with the policies, because people think, oh, your health. Oh, okay, you need better healthcare. Yeah, I mean, but healthcare is more than just seeing a doctor, once a year. I mean, imagine this. You have diabetes, you have a chronic condition. You go see your doctor once a year, and the average statistic, it gets thrown around a lot, is 7 minutes. Let's say it's a 15-minute interaction. Let's even say it's a half an hour interaction. Are
Yeah.
you telling me that half an hour interaction is good enough? That one single point in time where they take your blood pressure is good enough to take care of you for the rest of the year?
Yeah.
That sounds stupid, right? When you think
Yeah,
about
it
it, right?
sounds
It
so
sounds really
stupid.
dumb,
It sounds
but
so dumb.
that's the way our healthcare system works. Like, hey, this one moment in time, this one slice in time, and you and I both know a slice in time does not tell you literally anything outside of this is what it is in this moment in time. We need trends, right? We need to know why your blood pressure was high. What was there in a specific activity? Is it higher in the morning? Is it higher at night? Or is it after you go for a stressful run or whatever? Like, there's just so many things that are involved in just taking care of somebody with blood pressure, high blood pressure. This is why, like, I think technology can really help us, because we can take that 30-minute interaction and then get like data from like your Fitbit or whatever, right? It might not be completely accurate. Like people are like, oh my god, well that's not accurate. It's not a. I'm like, who the f- cares? It gives me at least a general range of where it is. Like
Yeah.
I don't care if it. I mean, yes, I do care if it's accurate. 100. I'm not going to say that, but if I can just get a general range of where how your blood pressure is going, even if it's like okay, it might not be accurate, but I see that hey, every morning you get up, I see your blood pressure rise, and then it kind of teeters off at the end of the day, or the other way around. Hey, at the end of the day, your blood pressure really goes spikes. Are you doing? Because then that can lead to hey, are you doing something at night? Like, are
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah,
you
yeah.
started working out and I don't even know, right? Or maybe your medication's wearing out so and we need to change it to twice a day, right? Just like things like that, but you won't know it in that one slice of time. You just don't. You just know that they sat down, and also blood pressures, and the actual way of taking blood pressure is you come in, you make the patient sit down for 5 to 10 minutes, right? And then you have to put their arm like kind of, on a table and then take it. What happens is we get walked into the office and they take our blood pressure right away. It's going to be generally higher, right? So we're already getting so we talk about accuracies and this and that. We don't even take we don't even do it the way we're supposed to do it, right? We're not even accurate in our own measurements sometimes.
So we've become the robots that we fear. The healthcare system works the way that it was set up. We're not taking blood pressure. I mean, that is so interesting. Like yeah, that's that's yeah, that's
I don't mean to be a downer, but
no, I
I
don't think
mean,
it's a downer. I'm just trying to sit in that a little bit because that's also interesting. Like there's just so much improvement and better whole understanding of things that we could do. Um, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's just
And
interesting to sit with.
I mean, like the good thing about it is I think people are starting to recognize social determinants of health. So there are programs that are being started, right? I mean, Meals on Meals has been around for a while, but just getting good meals to people, right? Two to three times a day. Um, Having car services so patients can make their appointments, right? That's another thing, right? Um, Financial services. I think people take for granted, you know, like all these like little things that like hey, being able to just drive to the closest Walgreens to pick up your script. Some people can't, right? They don't have a car, and that's one of the reasons like they don't pick it up because they just can't get to it, right? They have to wait for somebody to take them, or the bus doesn't stop close to there. They have work to do. I think another thing is like you and I, if we have something happen, we can miss days off of work, right? Because uh, our bosses will let us. But like some of these people that work in blue collar jobs, they can. I worked in oncology. I remember vividly multiple patients telling me, "Hey, I can't tell anyone I have cancer because they might fire me," or "Hey, can you change my appointments to these days or after these hours because I'm missing too much time and they're telling me they're going to fire me if I miss another day." Could you imagine that? Could you just think about that? You have cancer and you're worried about keeping your job. Like think like you and I would never have to deal with that, right? Because we are
Yeah.
in jobs that understand or whatever. But a lot of people don't have that luxury. And that's part of social determinants of health too, right? Like your environment, your stress, or whatever. Like, are you able to make it? What is stopping you from making it, right? Sometimes it is your own job, right? Like those are all part of what make a healthy person.
Yeah. I mean, I think so many things go down to like what's the root cause of like the issue, like even with so talking about some of the pain management stuff that I've been doing or having conversations about like opioids with prescribers, like so much of, like like one element is prescribing of opioids, but like so many elements lead someone to like addiction and dependency. And there's like a really cool, this dude Johan Hari's done some really cool talks on like the causes of depression and anxiety and the causes of addiction. And so much of that is environment, society based causes. But you look at the problem as like they're taking the drug, so that's the problem. It's like no, but there's so many steps that led to that person increasing the risk for addiction. There's a I feel like I've talked about it before. Have you heard of the ACEs study? ACEs
A little
studies
bit.
like adverse childhood experiences. It's basically, I feel like one of the bigger studies that said like stuff that happens to you in your childhood impacts you as an adult. So like, have you heard of that study before?
No, I have not.
So at the core, basically what happened is they were studying obese individuals, and they were like, if we don't give you food, will you lose weight? And they just like gave them nutrition. And so then obviously people lost a bunch of weight. And then they like sent them out into the world. And then a lot of people like regained that weight. So they started like being like, what happened when you got out there? And this one lady said that when she lost a lot of weight, she was like, people were starting to hit on her again. And she was sexually assaulted when she was young. So she gained weight to like protect herself. And so like, oh, that's fucking crazy. And so then they started just like asking everyone, I think it was at Kaiser Permanente in California, anyone that came in for a checkup, they were just like, they asked them like a bunch of questions about shit that happened to them when they were young, like assault, abuse, addiction, your family, all that stuff. And basically for like everything that you had as a child, you were 1x more likely to have an addiction dependency, some kind of like issue as you became an adult. Now I've like sort of very oversimplified the larger study, but it was just like essentially like there's so many things that lead to the thing that you see when they walk into the doctor's office. And so to like, is a 130-minute visit once a year going to help address that? Like, what are things that can be done in between that can begin to like chip down at like, almost like it's not, you don't just have diabetes, like you there's like maybe conversations about what's your lifestyle like, how are you eating, like what's your family stress level, all like so many other things, and multi-generational stuff. Like there's like, I mean, you've probably done some stuff on like I don't know if it's epigenetics, but basically like shit that happened to your grandparents and your family generations ago still impacts you like now without you even sort of like in the way that you're like maybe predisposed to like high blood pressure or some shit that's like almost out of your control. Like there's just so many factors, and it's I think it's good that we're working towards a more holistic, like I don't know, Eastern understanding of Western medicine. I guess you could sort of circle back to shit that people knew thousands of years ago, I guess, is essentially what happens.
Basically, we had it right. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. There's a reason why we're all doctors, right? Because we're trying to infiltrate. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No, I mean I think that's I mean that's kind of the crux of the point. I think that we are starting to get to that, and I think that's good to see. And I think for me, you can't hold individuals responsible for things that can't control, right? And I need to say that, I mean, there has to be individual responsibilities for things that they can't control, right? Like if you're like, if you're doing something bad and you're nothing's causing you to do that bad thing, like, yes, you need to, but I'm talking about um, like for example, like, we use the term non-adherent a lot in healthcare, right? Like, hey, this person's non-adherent, this person's non-adherent, this person's non-adherent. Well, if they can't afford their medications, does that truly make them non-adherent?
Can you define maybe how the health, like how you, what non-adherent means for the
Oh, yeah,
non-medicine
non-adherent
people?
means basically, I mean, in simple terms, the patient does not do what we tell them to do, right? They're not taking the medication.
Yeah.
Uh, they're not taking the medication we tell them to do. Um, they're not taking it as much as we want them to do. They're not, I'm talking about medications, but it can be also like a lot of different things, right? PT, they're not eating the right ways, whatever, right? No, let's just take the medication part of it. So I've had a couple of patients. I talked to them and I called them up and I'm like, hey, how's it going? You started this new medication. What's up? A couple months into it, we're like, hey, something's going weird. Like, um, we just want to. I was like, hey, how are you taking this medication? They're like, oh, I'm taking. I'm making this up. I don't remember the exact thing, but let's say they're taking it once a day. And I'm like, oh, you're supposed to take it twice a day. But they're like, well, this way it lasts longer. I'm like, what do you mean it lasts longer? Then I don't have to get a refill. Every month. And I'm like, okay, well, why are you doing that? I wasn't like trying to attack them or anything. I'm just trying to understand, like, why are you doing that? Like, well, because it's really expensive and I can't really afford it every month. Okay. So if I didn't ask that question, we would have already labeled them non-adherent. We would have switched them to another medication, and the same cycle will continue, right? But the real reason was they're not trying to be non-adherent. They're
Yeah.
they're actively taking the medication, right? But they're just trying to make it last longer because it's just really expensive for them, right? And for them, is like even a little bit of a good thing is better than none of it, right? Right? And that's how they're
Yeah.
thinking. Not necessarily the right way to doing it, but I can get mad at that, right? Like I don't have that problem. So that's what I mean. Like you can't blame somebody for something they can't control, right? They can't afford it. They're trying really hard. But those patients are labeled not adherent. They don't listen to us. They're problems. They're do this and that. They're really not, man. They're like trying to work. They're trying to help. no one wants to feel crappy. No one. I can't. I mean, there may be some maskets out there, or whatever, but like most people don't want to feel pain. They want
Yeah.
to live a good life, whatever, and they're gonna try their best to get to that point. But their best is may not be what we think is our, what we need them to be. But like, it's just like, I mean, that's an example of what I mean by like, we cannot have, we cannot have individual responsibility. We can't have like, we can't expect individual responsibility if the system does not allow for that.
Yeah. Was that like, is that when you were working in oncology? Was
Mhm.
that something that you sort of came about, like understanding how to navigate those questions? Was that like they were training y'all to like be more sort of connected on a human perspective with individuals?
I mean, I never really was trained. I mean, we went to the same school.
Yeah.
We were trained to a certain extent, right? But I mean, I'm not. There's no knock on our school. I think our school did really well, but I think that they can't teach you everything. I think for me, it was just I've always been somebody who wants to get to the root cause of something.
Mm.
Um, I in the beginning, I was. I will be honest. I was more um, judgmental, and then the more you experience people and their plights, you become less and less. Well, hopefully, you can become less and less judgmental. I mean, it took me time to get to that point. It wasn't like something I started with. I
It's like
mean,
something like you
natural.
built empathy, like you or
Yeah,
learned a little bit more. Like, not that you were a non-empathetic individual, but like, yeah,
yeah. I mean, I'm definitely more empathetic now than I first started. But I think I've always had this skill of being able to talk to people, making them feel comfortable with me, to be able to share a lot of things with me, because I try to come in a non-judgmental way. Just because I've seen things in my life and I've seen people try and fail, and also my upbringing. There's a lot of things kind of going back to like, there's a lot of things that kind of go into who and what a person is. And I'm not saying that
mm,
I'm amazing at, there's a lot of things I suck at, but I will say that like patient interviews is something that I am relatively good at.
mm,
So yeah, I mean, I think that that's one thing, but like sometimes we just don't have time to get to the root cause, right? But that isn't that sound sad? Like you don't have time to get the root cause of the patient that you're trying to help. Like, are
yeah,
we truly helping them, right?
yeah.
If
What
that,
are we doing then? We're just checking their blood pressure. We're just like,
yeah,
just like doing basic stuff that doesn't. I mean, obviously you should check your blood pressure, but like, yeah, you're not doing what a more yeah, something that actually helps them. You're not doing that.
yeah. I mean, like that interaction could have been, oh, I'm only taking once a day. Okay, can you please take it twice a day? I'll call you next week. Okay. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the majority of those interactions how they go, right?
yeah,
I've had those interactions myself where I'm just like, but but they take time, and I think that's where technology can help us is kind of going full circle. Like it's not, yes, it can drive us apart, right? But if we use it properly, it can also bring us closer together, right? It can give us more time to make those connections with our patients, with our fellow colleagues, or whatever, because it's taking care of the administrative burden, right, in the back end, right? You're not doing that. You have another extra hour of your day or whatever, right? I think that those are ways I think technology will help us, and that's kind of what I push. Is like, okay, let's figure out ways that technology can bring us together, which is kind of like a, I don't know, oxymoron almost. Like, hey, technology is generally driving a wedge between us, but I think that we're kind of in this weird time where there's been so many advancements, and I like think a lot of people don't know how to use things,
it's
right? They're like,
fast, man. Like the amount that it's like, I mean, we're literally in a point where there's, yeah, large language models that are like far beyond advanced, that like people like us who are born with, or like raised with computers, I feel so it's happening so fast, man. And I'm like fine technologically to imagine, like, my parents or my grandmother or whatever, like and then we live in America, so we're like around the technology shit all the time. Like we're
mhm.
and it's happening really fast and really rapid, and it's easy to just be like, I don't fucking understand any of that stuff. I like what, yeah, there's a, if you can understand it better, you could build a better relationship with it, or just like, yeah, leaning towards a positive, understanding that there is some value in it. It's not all evil, and um, yeah,
I mean, it goes back to the implementation of it, right? I think that like social media, right? And if you tell somebody like, hey, we're going to create a platform where you can talk to people all over the world anytime you want, and they can react to your kids' photos or your graduation, whatever, whenever they feel like, and everyone will know not know everything, but everyone will be able to kind of keep connecting, right? Like with your friends out in. I mean, for us, we have family all over the world, right? So it's sometimes hard. Like so, that sounds like a great idea, right? It sounds like a
Yeah.
great idea, but the implementation of it was a little flawed, right? It turned into something else that it wasn't supposed to. And I think that's what it is like, and that, in terms of product management, like that's the thing I like about product a lot is, you're almost guiding the future of your product, which will hopefully guide the future of just society in general. Is like there's one thing, like what's your North Star? Like what are we trying to build? And if it doesn't align with that North Star, then we don't put it in. If it But what happens is a lot of things get put in that don't really align with it. And also money corrupts a bunch of things, right? Another issue that happened with our technological boom with like Google, Facebook, well now Meta, all these companies, they were offering services for free, right? And we were like, oh, cool, this is free. Everyone loves free stuff, but we didn't know. But every company has to make money somehow, right? So they were farming our data. They're trying to make us stay on the platform much longer. So now they're building in addictive type things into it with the algorithms and all these things. Either like they're trying to make you rage. They eventually found that, hey, humans are more likely to stay on your platform with rage, and then all the algorithms started switching that way. Like so, it's just kind of like, you know, the initial thought of it was awesome,
Yeah.
but like almost making it free, maybe making it free was a bad idea, right? Like if they were being paid for it, maybe that would have made the product a little better over time, right? Because then you're not worried about algorithms or stuff. Like all the users are paying you, you're building up your thing. I'm not Probably it would still maybe it would have taken a
But I
little
see.
longer to get to this point.
Yeah,
But
but I see what, because essentially the product became our data and we were
Mhm.
giving that to them for free. And so then they realized, which they probably didn't, I don't think like Zuckerberg made it, yeah, wanting it to be a data suck. Like that wasn't the initial. They very quickly realized that people were putting all this information and that basically you could understand humans through everything we were putting in, and the profit became that. And potentially, if they were getting money from users, then maybe they wouldn't have gone to it, but you're probably correct that they would have eventually found it anyways. And maybe there's like, we can just make more money. But something you said about the North Star, I think about that. I think in a psychological perspective or whatever, one of my buddies who's a therapist will always say like, what's at the top of your dominance hierarchy? Basically, that essentially drives everything you do as an individual, as a family, as a company. And so, yeah, North Star, I think is kind of that same idea. What are you ultimately aiming for? And I think, I think about that sort of on a government scale, on a large company scale. Like it's pretty clear. You can tell, you can say all these things about morality and all this other shit, but you can, if you take a step back and look at the actions of an individual or a person, you can see what their number one driving, motivating factor is. And so it's important to know that, to be able to, like, I guess from a product perspective, like to understand like, all right, this doesn't meet with our thing at the top. Or if I'm thinking about myself, this isn't at the top of my, what I perceive to be the most important. So I'm just like, working towards being like, then I need to start removing that stuff from my life
Yeah.
if it's not helping me sort of like, and it's not even like a specific, if it's like be a good person or create a product that helps people sort of, I don't know, have a better hold of their diabetes management or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, and I think that's really important to get, like, kind of going back to healthcare, like it's built the way it is, or government. Like, yes, you can say a lot of things, but is everyone in agree or majority in agreement with it, right? Yeah, like you and I are in agreement with it, but is the majority as a whole? Are we the minority in the sense that, okay, like, I think that um I think that we should have maybe a single payer system or some sort of like Medicaid for all type situation, right? Because I've seen people having to quit their jobs to just afford care because, so they can fall out into a safety net. But other people's haven't. Maybe my what I've seen is obviously making me biased, and
yeah,
maybe I'm in the minority, right? And that's like another reason why I started the newsletter was I want to challenge my own views, right? I want to look at this stuff and be like, all these things that I'm writing about. Some of it is, yes, to just educate, but it's also to educate myself and like really like, okay, Zan, like you think this way. Is it true? And then not being afraid of being wrong, right? I think that that's another thing that we do really terrible job of is we don't allow people to change their minds. What's the point of growth if you're not able to change? And I just, like you want people to grow and become better people,
yeah,
but not everyone starts that way. People take random turns, twists and turns. But if they're getting to a certain point, let them get to that point. Yeah, I'm not, obviously I'm very hyper generalizing, right? Like there's certain people, like if somebody's a serial killer, like okay, come on, let's, we got other things going. But I'm just saying in generalities, right? It's just like weird, but like yeah, maybe we're in the minority, and that's one thing. But like government's not aligned. I think people are not aligned. I think we're more fractured than ever, and I think it's a lot of it is manufactured because
Mhm.
again, I think the minority is leading the majority, and
Mhm.
it's a lot of it is amplified by social media. People, oh man, this post got like 3,000 likes. Oh my god, this must be what everyone thinks. Well, that's like 3,000 people out of how many people are in America? Like 250 million or something
And a
crazy
lot
like
of
that.
that's like not even real humans, right? It's like automated bot type stuff,
Yeah.
amping it up
So
anyways, potentially. Can I ask you a question? I really like the idea of like the freedom to fail allows you to grow. Like that's an important, beautiful thing. How do you like, and I don't even know if especially in oncology, but obviously like you fail, something not good is happening. So like, how do you integrate that into systems in healthcare in general, where like, some and maybe you have to change the definition of failure, I guess. But I guess what I'm asking is, how do you, in something where precise is pretty important, right? Medication, right dose, right awareness of stuff. How do you find that works in a system where like sort of perfection is almost like needed to some degree, or like not being wrong, I guess, is needed. So how do you integrate that idea of failure and okay to fail within a system that needs like correctness and preciseness and all that?
I mean, what you just asked that question is why I think technology is so slow moving in healthcare. But I think that we have to kind of define what failure is and what
Yeah.
success is. I think success is like, oh, the patient gets better. Well, is that really success? Like, can you measure that really? Like, like what? I mean, yeah, you can measure it, but like, what is success? Like, okay, getting their blood pressure down by 50%, or not 50%. That would be crazy, man. Like, let's like, I mean,
Jesus.
I'm like five. You just killed the person. No.
Let's have fun.
No, what I mean is like, you need. It's funny in healthcare that we are so data driven in the sense that research and all that stuff, but our outcomes in real healthcare world is like just so nebulous. Like, oh yeah, the patient's getting better or this and that. Like, I think we need to really define what it is. And I'll honestly, to answer your question, I don't really know if we can do it in the system that we have, just because of all the things you said. Because we have to be so precise. We have to have fail safes and stuff, and that's what maybe we create an alternative system or some sort of alternative track where certain groups are testing things out, right? Or where we need to find another way of testing things that doesn't impact your day-to-day patient care. Yeah, I mean, like that's why I like administrative things, like things are taken care of administrative tasks, because right now everything is being messed up anyways. Billing's always messed up. All these things are always messed up. So if we can get a little bit better, that would be would be great. But like when anything that comes to patient care, you have to be really, really wary of. And
Aware of
all
what?
that being said, you have to be really aware of like not being wrong, because like
Oh,
you
right.
said, like like I talked to somebody recently, and he had an amazing question that he asked the startups that he works with. He's like, the first question I asked them is like, are you okay with having somebody's death be on you, like in the sense that you know your product fails, everything is done right, but your product fails and the patient dies because of it. Are you okay with that? Because every person that goes into healthcare, we know that that's a consequence for every single one of our actions, right? And he said that's like the first question I asked them, and if they can't answer that, then I know they're not. If they don't think about that, then I know that I'm not going to work with them, because they haven't really thought about the gravity of what they're building and why they're building it. And I found that question to be super powerful. But like that is what we're playing with in healthcare. I shouldn't say the word playing, but that's what we're dealing with in healthcare. One little mistake can literally kill somebody. And we've seen it. We've like it's scary. That's why we're so hyper vigilant. That's why we have to be so this. Like that's why, dude, I was talking to my wife the other day, and I was like, man, every time I used to come from like the hospital and stuff, I would be drained mentally, not physically, just mentally drained, because you're just people don't realize you can't be 100% on all the time, but we're told to be 100% on all the time, and you just come back and you're just like mentally drained, like um like it's just like I don't think people realize that, but But I think we need an alternative track. We need some sort of alternative method of testing these things. We need, because we need data. We need to be able to test it, whether it be digital twins or whatever. I don't really know, but we need some way to test these out in a sandbox environment where we can say like, yeah, this is working, this is not working, and then kind of move from there. Whether it be like, specific hospitals that are doing it, that have the budget to kind of do that stuff, but then you run into the idea of, um, okay, then the haves keep having and the have-nots have nothing, right?
Yeah.
That's one other thing that technology does that people don't realize, is it's starting to separate the haves and the have-nots even more because of
So
just
like
cost.
almost like in a similar like that Georgetown study was talking about, where the money is allows for like success. So hospital institutions that have more money can continue to grow and progress, whereas areas or hospitals that don't have anything maybe can't afford the best technology, so they're going to be left in the wayside relative to those other institutions.
100%.
Damn. Yeah, I'm going to go back a little bit. So we were talking about failure, and I wonder, like, even at uh the like, if you were a like, sometimes when I was managing people, like I wanted to create, especially when we were training to like prepare to do like detailing to talk to physicians, we would do like role plays where like I was like, this is the space where you can be wrong, because when you go out there you want to be correct. So even just in an institution, or like, in oncology, like whatever relationship you would have with your managers in the back room where you're talking about care, that would be the space of like, let's talk about all the stuff and then be wrong here, so that we can get to the right answer together, so that when we give the patient the medicine or whatever, or the conversation we have with them, like that's where the right happens, like the wrong happens sort of in the background, in a cultural, like, maybe that, I guess I'm just trying to think about how you can be okay to fail in an institution that needs perfection. And it's like at the way that you interact with your team members, possibly, or the way that you train and prepare, so that when you get out in the field, you can be right when
Yeah,
needed.
I think like the way you do it is you have to set up processes that take the human element out of it, as much as possible. So you're building in fail safes to work against humans, right? If you want to make a dose change or you want to make an adjustment, you make it difficult and like really making them think. And again, this is, I think, where technology can really help, like make us safer, is by, I think we learned this in school too, like both of us. You're only as good as your system, right? The Swiss cheese
Mm.
model and all that stuff. Like, if your system allows you to fail, you will fail, right? That's just going to be your baseline. If the system is constantly coming in your way and it's a good system, is streamlining work, you may not agree with it, but if the results are good, you have to work within it, right? Like, there's a lot of things that happen in healthcare or EMRs or whatever that people hate because, oh man, I gotta do so much to do this like little mini change, but that's there for a reason, because they want to make sure that that dose change you're making, you are really really sure you want to make that dose change, right?
Yeah.
And that is just, and that's what I mean. Like, I think to have that kind of stuff, like you have to assume that humans are going to fail, and you have to take away all of the, not all of it, but most of the areas where humans, y- like that you have human input in some way, shape, or form, right? And that sounds kind of counterintuitive to everything I've been saying, like, bringing together, but that's not taking away the human interaction, like you
No, that's like
talking to the
actually
person.
it's also understanding people. Like, we do
Yeah.
make mistakes. Like that seems to give credence to the humanness of it all, actually, is like a better, like, we will mess up. And if you can know where where our blind spots are, you can, like, yeah, potentially use technology to catch that stuff to protect against it.
Yeah. I mean, imagine like you you're 100%, like I said, you have to be 100% on all the time. You have like 5 minutes where you get a text from somebody and you're now freaking out, and now you have an order coming through, and your mind isn't 100% in it. We're human beings, right? Like, your wife or mom or whoever send you a text like, hey, I need to call you, like, it's like really cryptic, and it might not be anything, like it might be like, hey, what do you want to eat tonight? But you don't know that, right? You have no
Yeah,
idea, and like and then you accidentally like miss something,
yeah.
and now it reaches the patient. Like, does that make you a bad pharmacist, a bad person, a bad doctor? No, it just makes you human, right? And like, just that's what I'm saying. Like, a little slip of anything, just your humanity will break down. Like this, but the system allowed your humanity to come into play to make that mistake, right? So that's what I mean by you kind of have to take all of the, because we're emotional creatures and emotions can cloud judgment.
Yeah. 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 That's you had I wanted to I don't know if I texted you about this, but there was one um blog post here. I wrote down the name because I thought it was so interesting. You said, what can the ER learn from Chili's? And I think it was about like wait times at the
Mhm.
ER. And it was actually what was such a trip. Like like within that month, I had to take a family member to the ER, and we got there at 11, and they didn't get seen until 5 in the morning. And it was like my memory, it was like that happened, and then that morning I woke up and you wrote that article. So I don't know when like time was, but it was like so close, and it was like so closely linked, and it was like described the experience really well. And I'll let you talk about sort of that article, but it was just like basically like the way that you go to an ER, like the experience was like my family member went there, and then we checked in, and then we just waited in this like packed ass ER, and everybody's sick, and it's just like I don't want to be here, man. Like I'm gonna get sick just being in this shit. And then eventually they took him in, but like your article was like, you don't have to just sit in that room for 7 hours if you know that they're not going to take you. Like you can go home and sign up. And so maybe you can explain that that process, and like just as a way to highlight, technology's value and some of that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah. So this our article was kind of like Chili's was my first interaction with like those like buzzer things in restaurants, and I found it really fascinating. So that's what I was kind of thinking, like, hey, why can't we do that in the ER system? So you have an online system where you sign up, or you can see wait times. You can like put yourself on a list, and then when you come in, and then it'll tell you like, hey, come in 3 hours, come in 4 hours, come in 7 hours, and but at least you're at home in your bed. As long, obviously it's if it's not a crisis situation. If you're like bleeding out, yes, please go to the ER. But it's like, like, hey, I have a cough, I need to go in or whatever, right? And so I was like, why can't we do wait times in ERs, right? Like we triage all the time, and then people were like, well, you need the humans and this and that. I'm like, well, yeah, you can have humans kind of going through things. You can have a video chat with somebody, like you pull up, like, hey, this is how I'm feeling, and the PA or NP or nurse can start triaging you and putting you there. And like the funny part is like, when you get to the ER, like you mentioned it, you're already sick. There's people around you that are sick. So you're likely, one of the places you catch a disease or like some infection is in the hospital, right? Like there's a reason why people try to get you out of the hospital as quickly as possible, because you're more likely to get one there because of all the things that are going around you. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
just kind of like, it's kind of going back to the consumerization. Like we can take things out of the consumer world that work really well, right? When you sign up for, online with with a restaurant, isn't it nice to know like, hey, wait time is 45 minutes, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it happens to be, but it's just nice knowing, right? And then you're in a list, you can physically see the list, like, oh, hey, I'm 4 people down. It's just nice to know. And that's just like eating. Imagine like in your health, like why don't we, it's just about transparency and just giving people a good experience, and kind of going back, like if we were looking at them as customers, would we have gone down this road further? Because again, a customer, they're paying you, they're your product, they're not your product, but you need to make them feel good about their experience, right? But like
Yeah,
our
that
experience is
experience sucked.
terrible.
Oh, it was horrendous, man. Like, and it was obviously it was horrendous just because the family was sick, but it was just like it's 11, it's blows, dude. It was so
Yeah.
terrible. And like, in this, and I think part of that you said is like you would get triaged, which is like they assess you early. I don't know how to
Mhm.
simplify what triage. They basically assess you early to figure out where they do you need to wait or do you need to go in right away. But like if it's not super serious, where you're obviously like not bleeding out or whatever, you're not having a heart attack, like it'd be nicer to just wait at the house. And
Yeah.
like if you're gonna sit in there's like the seats are not comfortable. Like I'm, whatever, everybody's trying, but like there was so many people, there was really nowhere to sit. Like like it's like we could be chilling at the crib, man. I'd rather just be at the house and
Yeah.
hang out.
Yeah, man, eating some like good food, laying in bed, knowing that, hey, let's get there at 4 a.m. Like we'll get there at 4 a.m., knowing that we're gonna get in, or at least even if you have to wait, you only have to wait like a couple hours max, right? Let's say like random things come in, whatever. Not there for like 7 hours, 8 hours,
Yeah.
And then also, if you have a system online that shows it, you can be like, okay, this hospital here has an 8 hour wait, this hospital only has a 1 hour wait, okay, let me go there. So that kind of helps the burden for the whole system, and you're not like, one hospital isn't just getting hammered just because they happen to be in an area where there's a lot of people or something is happening there, right? And that was the other part of that too. Like, is just like creating a system like that where you're just you're just upfront with your wait times, and people are just know, and then they can kind of be like, okay, I'd rather just let's just go to this hospital. They don't have a huge wait time, and we can just go there and get treated.
How do like when you're like Googling restaurants and it'll have like average wait time, but then it'll say like live and it's like busier than normal. Is that just pulling location data from people's
Mhm.
phones?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay. That's so I like that stuff. Yeah, that's so interesting. It's like, yeah, I guess I'm not gonna go here now. It's the busiest it's ever been. Hmm. Damn. So ERs could do that. They could just pull location or whatever Google is doing to pull location
Yeah, I
data.
mean, I mean, they could, but they're not going to right now. But yeah, I mean, technically they could. I mean, it happens everywhere else, right? I mean, like again, it happens in all of the things. The thing that I kind of advocate for is why don't we make healthcare, the interactions with healthcare, align with our interactions with literally everything else in our life. Like, well, then people are like, oh, we can't trust patients with the data or this. And like, why not? It's their healthcare. Like, can you imagine you have your money in the bank and the bank is like, hey, Chirag, we don't trust you when you're trying to take out something, right? You're trying to withdraw money. Hey, Chirag, we don't trust you with this. We're just gonna hold on to it for a while.
Isn't
You'd
that
be like,
kind of what happens sometimes? I guess that is that like I know what you're saying, but like there is I mean the bank there are like limits on how much you can take out, and sometimes they can freeze your accounts in certain countries that have done that, I guess. But I guess at the core I understand what you're saying. It's not-
I mean, you have to like have some like crazy things, but in general, right?
yeah,
They'll
sure.
let you they'll let you do that. But like in healthcare, it's like the exact opposite. Nope, sorry, we don't trust you. Sorry, this is way over your head. Let me decide if it's way over my head. And also, if it's way over their head, what are we doing to make it not way over their head? Are we, again, this is where AI and all these things can help. It can take what you wrote, translate it in a way where the patient can understand it, drop it down to a fourth grade reading level, maybe translate it to a different language. We don't speak different languages. Like, if you don't speak a certain language, maybe AI can translate it to that, where it might not be the perfect translation, but it's
Yeah.
at least more so than them trying to read English, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I mean, I think that like we have, again, that's what I mean. Like, we need to get off our high horse. Like, we need to empower patients to take care of themselves, because it's funny that we put the onus on the patient to get better, but we don't give them any of the power to do it. You know what I mean? They depend on us to do everything. And like, I think that if people are more empowered to take care of themselves, I think we would see better outcomes, in the sense that, I mean, imagine like, y- well, you're renting, right? Still?
Mhm.
Yeah. So when something breaks, you call the landlord, right?
Or my sister's fiance, but yes.
Um, but yeah, I mean, but somebody else is fixing it for you, right? But if you
Yeah.
own a house, I mean, you still might call your sister's fiance, but now you're footing the bill, you're
Yeah.
doing all that. So you're going to be a little bit more careful. Not saying that you're not careful. If your landlord's listening, Truck's probably a great tenant. He's not breaking things. But some other people, they're, like, you go to rental properties, like, oh, there's a hole in the wall, whatever, we'll fix it. Or, their things are dirty, whatever, their things are not kept up. You're not keeping up with your appliances because you don't own it, right? That's the
Mm.
same thing that's happening with healthcare. It's like we don't let the you don't really own your healthcare, right? If you think about it, you don't really own it. Somebody else is owning it. You're basically renting your body. Like, no, let them own their healthcare, let them own their body, and let them empower them, in the sense that, hey, you can make this better. And that's why I like technology, like Fitbits, all these things. Like, I've seen patients like, oh, they got the smartwatch, whatever, and they're more in tune with what's going on, like what they're eating. Oh man, I ate this and this happened, or I started working out, and or I did this in the morning and this, my blood pressure ran through the roof. Maybe I shouldn't do that. It's like I'm not saying more data is better, but the right kind of data and the right kind of information can really help them a lot. And then maybe they can just take care of themselves, and not take care of themselves completely, but they can take a more active role in their healthcare, because again, they're only seeing us once a year if
Yeah.
they're lucky. The rest of the time they're on their own. Like, and if they're calling us, they're on hold, or we're playing phone tag back and forth, and we're not really answering their questions and this and that. Like, it's a really frustrating experience. So like, why don't we empower them even more? And in the end, it'll just make our jobs a little easier. Maybe not in the
Totally.
beginning, but over time it'll make our jobs a lot easier.
Yeah, in the long term. So part of the work I do is academic. Well, some of the work I do is academic detailing and meeting with doctors. And like the cool thing about academic detailing, going to like building relationships, it's like we're trying to build relationships with prescribers to learn about their practice, learn about their approach to care, learn about their patients over like a long term. Ideally, like every couple months we meet with them and we build a rapport with them. And so one of the things I've been speaking to, I've been doing a lot of work with opioids, and meeting with doctors and talking about pain management. And one of the projects is out in like rural Illinois, so like 2.5 hours just straight west in like Lee, Ogle, and Whiteside County. So we're like just straight off of 88, 2 hours outside of Chicago. And I would talk to doctors, and there was just I would just get this like sort of it would feel like they were pretty exhausted about patients not like listening or making changes, and it's I could hear in their voice they were struggling between wanting to like help patients but being frustrated with patients like not wanting to make change. And one of the things, after so many of those conversations, I started asking prescribers, I was like, what space are we giving our patients? This isn't technology based, but what space are we giving our patients to think about their motivations for wanting to make change? Like, just saying you need to be healthier because you don't like you need lower blood pressure doesn't mean anything. People need their own internal motivations to make change. We know that about ourselves. It's almost like you think that because you're in the medicine space, like the way that you as an individual act has nothing to do with like the other person. So like you can't just tell another adult, hey bro, you got to stop doing this. Most people need a reason, whatever that internal motivating factor is. And what are we doing in a healthcare space to allow our patients to even think about that, to ultimately make our job easier? I think, like, instead of being jaded and frustrated about like a patient isn't exercising, like, just telling someone to do exercise doesn't mean anything. Like, what is someone capable of? What are they trying to accomplish? Like, all of those things. And can you understand the patient? And, that comes down to like not having enough time to maybe do that because you're trying to manage diabetes and heart failure and their blood pressure and their smoking and all this other shit in 7 minutes or 15 minutes and all of that. But like, what are we doing to empower patients kind of at a sort of a larger level to take control of their healthcare? And data and technology plays like a giant role in just even the conversations we can have of helping people understand their own internal motivating factors is like huge. But yeah, ultimately, like, that patient centric approach to care seems to be like really, really important. Because yeah, I like you said it nicely. It's like we're almost just treating people like they're renting their body. I guess from a spiritual sense we are, but from a sort
Mm.
of more here sense, like.
No, I mean, you touched on a lot of great things. I think we talk about patient-centric care, but none of healthcare is patient-centric. Let's be honest there. Um, it just isn't.
Yeah.
And then, I think so. I talked to a bunch of people, and I've talked to some OTs and PTs, and they do a really good job of this. They say they're trained to ask the patient what their goal is, right? Is your goal to run a marathon, or is your goal to just walk up your 10 flights of stairs, right?
Mm.
Those are two wildly different goals, right? So they're like, okay, I want to be able to walk up the stairs, get on the ground, play with my grandkids or whatever. But I'm not about to run a marathon anytime soon. Okay, great. We're gonna get to that goal, right? Kind of going back to your internal motivation. What we do in healthcare, like, I mean, outside of OT and PT is healthcare, but I'm saying the general, like, prescriber, whatever. Okay, we're gonna make everyone run a marathon. That's our goal. We're setting that goal for them. Hey, you're all gonna run marathons. No, not everyone wants to do that, right? Like, I mean, kind
Yeah.
of going back to like, what is motivating you? What is your actual goal? And I think that is a conversation that we need to start having with our patients. Is okay. We know you have diabetes, you have heart problems, whatever. Like, a telling them what the ramifications of that is. I think a lot of times they don't understand what that can lead to, right? And if you can humanize that a little bit more and be like, hey, if you continue down this road, you might lose a leg or like this. I mean, I think we're too afraid to scare our patients with certain things, but like we have to be open and honest with them and have these conversations and be like, hey, what do you want to do? Like in 10, 15 years, do you want to be able to use your both your legs, right? Like, what do you want to be doing? Like, you want to be able to, if some people may not, and like, okay, fine, you don't want to do that, you continue around this road and you'll get to that point. But then and this might sound crass, then you spend less time with that patient and more time with the other person that's like, no, you know what, my daughter's having some grandkids, I really want to be able to take them for walks and pick them up and run around with them. And like, yeah, I do not want to lose my legs or feet. Okay, great. Let's just take small steps to that point, right?
Yeah.
And right now, what we're doing is we're putting everyone in the same box, mainly because we just don't have time, and we're going off these guidelines, which we should be. 100% should be guideline based. But even with you personally, like, do you just go from 0 to 100 on a task or a skill or something? No, it takes time. Over time, it's just like we need to give them time. It might take years, maybe a decade, couple months, but then also we're going towards their personal goal, not our goal, right? We're not going by this paper told me to tell this patient that they need to have an A1C of less than whatever it is, 5. I can't remember now. No, their goal is to be able to walk and have fun with their children. So once you humanize, their A1C is going to keep dropping because they understand to get to that point they have to do this, right? So now it's goal based versus just a random number that's a lab that's being drawn every 3 months and they don't understand what the hell they're doing.
And I think, like, sometimes if you set too far of a goal, it's like unachievable, and so you're gonna fail. But like if you start with, I want to bend down and play with my kids or whatever, like I feel like there's probably that's not where it's gonna stop. And if it is, then great, you reached your goal. But like realistically, you start to feel better and good. You're probably gonna start to like, maybe eventually get to that marathon, like that you didn't know that you were gonna try and do anyways, but because you started that thing. But yeah, it's so interesting that prescribers have legitimately been like, I haven't even thought of that. Talking to my patient about what their goal is. And this is not even to say anything negative about the prescriber. I think there's just so many pressures and all this shit that you're trying to do and deal with, like insurance-based stuff, trying to figure out like what's going to be covered. Honestly, probably scared of like even prescribing opioids because you're going to get in trouble, or like the world is saying that you shouldn't do that and all that stuff. And so there's so many other pressures on top of like you have a life outside of this. You have family, kids, other interests that you're trying to pursue, and all of that pressures from the institution, everything. And it just is like, damn, some simple questions can make probably, again, like your job maybe a little easier. If someone isn't doing exercises because you're telling them to do way too much, why don't you just lessen that goal? And you can probably still maybe get to that goal later in a couple years. But yeah, you need time, you need you need to be on again, that like, going back to like what we said earlier about the challenge of building a relationship with people, like that's a lot of emotional investment into your patients. And do you have that? Does your institution foster that? Do you like, it's hard, man. It's hard to be on, it's hard to be empathetic. And I mean, those are things we should do because it's like kind and nice, but
Yeah. 100%. And then, like, kind of to my point, like when I said it was being crass with the person that's okay with losing their legs and being in a wheelchair for the rest of their life, you don't have to spend too much time with them anymore. Now you can take your emotional resources and spend it with somebody else. And that might sound really terrible. And me being a healthcare provider, it kind of hurts to say that out loud, but it's true. Not everyone. I have to be really careful with what I say. Not everyone deserves your time. And I'm going to just say it like that because there's certain people that are time suck that take away from others that would value your time more, right? So we also have to, I think we also as a medical community have be okay with it. Some people you just can't help. They might see you once a year, whatever. You're gonna have the same conversation with them. You can set like a really minuscule goal. They're just never gonna listen to you. They're just doing it to check a box off something, and they're just not gonna listen to you. So you just don't you don't need to. I mean, yeah, you chip away at them slowly, but you and I both know we've talked to patients and talked to them. There's some that just don't get it and just don't want to get it. So you just do your thing and just move on. And I think that should be okay for us to do. Like you said, we're still human beings. We still have families. We have all this stuff in the background.
yeah.
We can't save everyone. And then to your point about why we don't ask these questions, because we're never told to ask these questions. Were we ever told to ask our patients what their goal was with their hypertension, diabetes? No, we were told the guideline says A1C needs to be below this. The hypertension goal is this. This is what is pass or fail. It's like a pass or fail. It's not a slow thing. It's just you are or you're not, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, we've taken something to work towards and made it, yeah, like a pass or fail thing. So when they first came out with the CDC like pain management guidelines in 2016, which was like kind of the first sort of like large scale, like this is the best way to manage our patients on pain, kind of. That I think some of the authors had to write an op-ed like a little bit after it came out to be like, these aren't like hard and fast rules, man. Like you still need to like, you shouldn't just drop patients off of their high dose opioid because it's dangerous, because dropping too quickly can lead to issues as well. And so you still need to look at the patient from a holistic perspective. And it's like, yeah, that's that idea of, yeah, pass or fail is a good way to describe it. If it isn't a pass or fail, there's like gradients. And I think with diabetes, actually, they've started doing that, like sort of there's like different A1C goals based on patient goals, but also just like realistically, like someone's old and their A1C, which is for those of non-medicine people, it's just a marker of like diabetes control over 3 months. But like you just understanding like, all right, this person maybe isn't capable of getting to the lowest goal that we're aiming for. So let's set a different goal. And again, I think that comes down to like feeling successful will hopefully lead to more success in patients, and not to be like, not to have their motivation destroyed. And you can actually use that success to get to something better later.
Yeah, man. This was like really hammered into me earlier in like when I was not a resident, sorry, during my 4th year rotation. I was at the VA and we had a lady that came in. She had one leg amputated, the other one was pretty much close to being amputated. She would not take her medications. She was whatever, and I went in and talked to her, and I was really scared to talk to her because she was labeled a difficult patient. So I just asked her like, hey, your numbers are kind of not great. Like, are you taking these medications? I ran through a list of the common questions, like, hey, and then I asked her like, hey, why aren't you taking these medications? Just why? No judgment here. I just want to know why you're not doing this, because it will help you. But I just want to know why you're not doing it. And she told me that she was proud of how far she's come, and she wanted to do it on her own. She wanted to feel pride of the fact that she didn't need medications to take care of her chronic disease. And I said, great that is a great goal to get. But I will tell you, would you be proud if you lost your I mean, I was kind of brutal, and I'm surprised I was this brutal as a student, but I was just basically like, if you lose your leg, you won't be able to walk with crutches anymore. You'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. Would that make you happy? And she's like, no. I feel, you're a strong individual. You want to be able to work on your own, but the path you're going down is not going to lead to your goal. It's only going to lead you away from it. And she's like, okay, yeah. And then we kind of had like a conversation, and then the next time she came, her numbers were a little better. She was taking her medications, not all of them exactly the way we wanted, but I was so happy because I saw, like, kind of going to the point, what was her goal? Her goal was to be able to tell people and be proud of the fact that she was able to beat these diseases and do it on her own. But the fact is that her actions were not aligned with her goals. All I did was try to help her align her actions with her goals. That's it. And she started getting better. She started getting, I don't know what happened to her after I left, but that was in the beginning of I was very fortunate to have that kind of experience early in my career, to where I was like, okay, you really need to get to the root cause of people's goals and what it is. And then aligning things with their goals is a lot easier for them to understand than me just telling them, hey, you have to take this medication twice a day because your blood pressure's high. Okay, great. Like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah, man, that's a beautiful, it's a beautiful concept. I mean, it's just like, it's, just like trying to remember that we're all humans, man. And like, I think it's just, I just always go back to like, would you want to be talked to like this, man? Like, you already kind of know yourself a little bit. You know how you respond when people tell you stuff. So why couldn't we just give that same energy to other people? And you can still be their physician. You can still be the knowledge person, but like, I think, I don't know. I think that there's just so much more improved ways that we could do that stuff. And being a partner and all of that is better, ultimately.
100%.
Man, okay. It's interesting. I really like it. We're getting kind of close to our time. I want to give you time to go deal with your contractors and all of that. But one, thank you for being on. This was mad interesting. And you'll probably honestly become this podcast's technology expert person within the field of healthcare.
You might need, yeah.
No, I mean, I got you until I find someone better, and I probably won't find anyone better. So,
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Thanks for the vote of confidence.
yeah, maybe shout out your like all the stuff that you do again, and where people can find you. What the sort of overall theme of the stuff that you write about and talk about is.
Yeah, no, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm the most active. I'm really bad at the other socials, but yeah, LinkedIn is the best way. That's where I post stuff. My newsletter and podcast is called Digital Thoughts. You can find it on Substack. It's also linked on my LinkedIn page. And then yeah, say hi. I love talking to people, meeting new people, and just talking about random stuff. I learn a lot. I learn more from other people than I have, just by myself. So love conversations. But yeah, I mean, then like I said before, newsletter is just looking into healthcare from a clinical perspective and trying to incorporate, kind of teach the tech side about clinical medicine and clinical medicine about the tech side. And I don't go like, I try to do it in a way where I go like surface level. I go deep enough, but I try to do a surface level where you kind of just generally understand the different concepts. And then the podcast is just having cool people in digital healthcare, and just talking about their experiences, and what they're doing, why they're doing it. And again, I selfishly do that for myself, but had some amazing people on, that are extremely smart. So if you're building a healthcare product, my goal with the podcast is if you're building a healthcare product, you can kind of listen to everything. You'll learn marketing, sales, the clinical side, the technology side, do's and don'ts and things like that. So,
Dope. Thanks, bro. Appreciate it.